So as we move on to the gold verb, now we have some other interesting parameters we can adjust. In addition to pre-delay, you have room size and you have room shape. And as you move the room shape, you go from triangular to rectangular to pentagonal to sextagonal to septagonal. Basically this number indicates the number of sides of your room shape. I think when I'm playing with it earlier, I like the triangle the best. But again, you get a high cut, you get a density, you get a reverb time, very, very short, like 3/4 of a second. You get initial delay, and again, pre-delay. And again, the mix at 100%. Now, this is really the part I want you to pay attention to. Because this is where the first time where you actually have something that's dedicated to being ER, or early reflections. And when the slider is 100% to the left, it means it's all early reflections. And when I slide it to the right, it's all reverb. Most times you'll find it at about 50-50. And you get a little bit of early reflections and a little bit of reverb. But the idea is to showcase reverb not in a traditional setting. And early reflections is a great way to do that. I'm a big, big fan of using early reflections on vocals because, again, they give you size without smearing the intelligibility or the time of the actual vocal. Let's give a listen to this one, and I'll go back and forth between early reflections and then the reverb so you can really hear the difference.
Sometimes I feel like I'm weightless, like I'm suspended in falling dust. The world is moving in a circular bolt. I can't escape.
I'm going to pause it there. Remember, we turned the send down to -10. I'm going to put it back to -6 because this effect is a little less pronounced than the EN verb, which I'm finding to be fairly heavy-handed. And I'll do it again, early reflection to reverb sound. I'm actually going to turn the reverb time up to about 1 second so you can hear it a bit more clearly. And here we go again. Early reflections, then reverb.
Sometimes I feel like I'm weightless, like I'm suspended in falling dust. The world is moving in a circular bolt. I can't escape. Sometimes I walk out at sunrise, and I feel my skin feel alive.
So at the end there, I did half the chorus with background vocals and early reflection, and then the other half with reverb. And you can tell when the reverb comes on, some of the power and some of the urgency of the vocal goes away. It just sort of floats out there in time. Now, you may not love these particular settings of the early reflections, but this kind of a sound actually, I think, works really, really well on the background vocal. It's a little heavy-handed for the main vocal, so I might send more to the background and less to the lead. In fact, let's get in here to the lead vocal and turn it down just on the lead.
Sometimes I feel like I'm weightless, like I'm suspended in falling dust.
So for me, on the lead vocal, that sending less of it actually helps. And if I flash forward here to the chorus,
In the subtle shift, change has been made.
but again, that's the first verb we've seen that actually gives you the early reflection versus reverb choice. So if we move on to the platinum verb, you'll see much the same settings as you saw in the gold, including shape. Here's that balance, the frequency, cutoffs, and density again, pre-delay over here, room shape. This is a 7-sided shape versus a 3-sided shape. The room size is roughly the same, and the reverb time looks like it's just about the same as well. Oh, it's actually a little longer, so let's bring that down to about a second. Actually, let's leave it up higher. Let's see what happens when we make it longer. So now we're comparing, again, I'll do early reflection versus reverb of the 7-dimension room at a longer reverb time. And let me get these two back to being even. So this is at -6 roughly. Put that there. And let's get this to -6 as well. So now they're both sounding the same. Here we go.
Sometimes I feel like I'm weightless, like I'm suspended in falling dust. The world is moving in a circular bolt. I can't escape. Sometimes I walk out at sunrise, and I feel my skin feel live. I want to knock down my walls of flesh and bone and let the world inside.
So this was much smoother for me. Something about the longer reverb time actually works pretty well here. Although you'll notice that when we went to the early reflection, it didn't sound all that much longer because, again, this parameter, this reverb time, really only matters on the right side of the scale for reverb. With early reflections, it's just the sound leaves, it hits 1, 2, 3 surfaces and comes right back to your ears. So there is no 3-second reverb time because there's no reverb. It's just early reflections. So when you're all the way over here, now you get this 3-second reverb time. And for me, it's just swimming. I did kind of like it at a 50-50 blend. And so if you end up leaving it here, that's cool if it gets the sound you like. But again, the time on the reverb, especially as you go further to the right, I don't know about you, but what I find myself concentrating on is I start hearing the reverb more than I'm hearing the main vocal. And I'm not really listening to the main vocal or what he's saying. I'm just listening to the time of the reverb because it's such an interesting sound that I'm really not even paying attention to his vocal. I'm just paying attention to the reverb. And that's not necessarily the goal. That could be highly distracting, especially if you put a lot of time into an effort into writing these words and telling the story. You want your listener to hear those and understand them. So again, with vocals, I tend to hang out more in the early reflection territory than anything else. So that's the Platinum Verb. And then lastly, I have a Space Designer. Now, what's a trip about Space Designer is that it's really it's an impulse response reverb, which means it's trying to emulate an actual real space that was sampled. So there are these sampled reverbs that this tool is leveraging, and you're actually listening to the sound of a room that was sampled for this preset. Now, it's not nearly as simple as some of the other reverbs. You just don't get the same kind of parameters. You notice we get length of time is buried in this little black area over here. Here's your dry, which we probably want down to nothing. And then here's the reverb, which we want up to maximum. Here's your pre-delay. And then the spread is has a lot to do with, again, the sort of stereo-ness of it all and how far around the room the reverb is bouncing. And here's the reflection shape. You can see you can really dial in how much it slides down. Now take a look over there. You see that bar changing? And you see how this shape changed? When I move this parameter, in fact, when I move any parameter, what's happening here is it's literally recalculating the reverb. So if you make a parameter adjustment and things don't sound like they're moving and then all of a sudden they change really dramatically, it's because it's thinking and the bar is processing leftward, and then when it's done processing, you can get the sound. So it's a good idea to kind of work these parameters in time. So you do the change, wait for that to happen, wait for it to reflect, and then listen. Because otherwise, if you're moving it while you're listening, it's not really changing the sounds in real time. You have a filter over here, and for now, I'm not gonna mess with that. But I do want to draw your attention to this tiny little button right here that says Preserve Length, because when this is checked, the quality of the reverb happens in the same length of time as the dry vocal, but without this, you actually can elongate this reverb farther beyond the main vocal. So let's take a listen here. It's again, very difficult to create just early reflection reverb with this particular tool. That's not really what this is designed for. This is really designed to give you a real room that's been sampled. But let's take a listen.
Sometimes I feel like I'm weightless, like I'm suspended in falling dust.
So as you probably noticed, I was adjusting a lot of parameters while it was playing to show you this bar, and it moves and it moves and it sort of processes and processes, and then when it's done processing, then the sound changes. So it can be very difficult to work with this tool in real time. But as you can hear, it's starting to create kind of something of a reversed effect, and that's because this volume envelope is waiting time, and then it gets louder. After the main vocal has come in and starts going down, the reverb actually starts going up, which gives your ear the impression that there's a reverse. You actually have a reverse button here. Let's take a listen to that.
Sometimes I feel like I'm weightless, like I'm suspended in falling dust. The world is moving in circular bolt eye.
Now, I don't know if you noticed this, but when I hit the reverse button, it didn't sound reversed. It actually sounded proper, because this is where it sounds reversed, and then if you reverse the reversal, it sounds normal. So something to keep in mind, that there's a relationship between the reverse button and the volume envelope at the same time. Sort of flatten things out a little bit so that they're more even to each other. We'll probably have less of a reverb or a reverse sound here.
Sometimes I feel like I'm weightless, like I'm suspended in falling dust. The world is moving in circular bolt eye. Can't escape. Sometimes I walk out sunrise.
So I happen to really like this sound. I think it's a little much in terms of volume, so I would probably just come over to my two vocals and turn them down. So I'm just sending a lot less to it. But I actually kind of like that sound. And you can hear I was playing with the early Reflections, or the PreDelay. I had it at 64, I brought it down to 12 and brought it back up. And you can hear how the reverb has a delay and then it doesn't, and then it did again as I went from 64 to 12 and then back. If you hit this preserve length button again, it sort of keeps the reverb working in the same time as the vocal. So let's turn this on and off, and this will be the last thing we show here.
Sometimes I feel like I'm weightless, like I'm suspended in falling dust. The world is moving in circular bolt eye. Can't escape.
So I don't know if you noticed, but since there's 64 milliseconds of pre-delay, the reverb still starts 64 milliseconds after the main vocal. But when I click the preserve length button, they both end at the same time. And when I don't have the preserve length button checked, the reverb extends beyond the end of the main vocal. So that's a choice you might want to consider. You might want the pre-delay to have just a little bit of delay at the beginning to give the vocal a sense that it's in a larger space, like an auditorium. But if you leave the preserve length button checked, they end at the same time. It can really help, again, increase intelligibility of the vocal. In other words, you understand what he's saying a lot more. So those, my good friends, those are a few different kinds of reverbs that Logic presents to you. Again, the two things that I'm trying to show more than anything else are the concept of pre-delay, where the signal is delayed by just a little bit before the reverb actually starts. Again, with EN verb, you have an envelope as well, so you can create something of a reversed effect. And then when we got to the gold verb, we finally get to the other thing I really wanted to show you, which is early reflections. Again, giving the sense of both delay and size without the big washy, smooth, kind of 80s Michael Bolton reverb sound that I'm just not a fan of. What can I tell you? Not a fan. So I hope this has been helpful. I encourage you to play with this, this sort of reverb concept. Reverb as not reverb as much as you can in as many places as possible. It works really well on a lot of different kinds of instruments, but again, today I'm using them on vocals. Big fan of the early reflection, and in particular, the Space Designer with the preserve length button may be one of my favorites here. So what I will do, though, is I will leave Space Designer active, and I'll leave Verb active, and I'll sort of A-B them while they're playing down. And I'll just kind of turn some of them on and off in various combinations while it's playing, so you can get a sense of what some of these things might sound like if they're stacked up. And thanks, of course, to John Gillick for the session. Really looking forward to the song being finished.
Sometimes I feel like I'm weightless, like I'm suspended in falling dust. The world is moving in a circular bolt. I can't escape. Sometimes I walk out at sunrise, and I feel my skin feel alive. I want to knock down my walls of flesh and bone, and let the world inside. And in the subtle shift, change has been made. Sometimes I feel like I'm weightless, like I'm suspended in falling dust. The world is moving in a circular bolt. I can't escape. Sometimes I walk out at sunrise, and I feel my skin feel alive. I want to knock down my walls of flesh and bone, and let the world inside. And in the subtle shift, change has been made.
Well, I don't know about you folks, but that A-Verb is actually pretty good. It's super simple, super easy to use, takes up very little processing power, and it gives you a pretty good sound. It's a pretty cheap way to get some depth on your vocals without having to dig into some of the craziness of Space Designer. Of course, Space Designer sounds fantastic, and you do have a lot of control, but you are limited by the quality and the size and shape of the impulses that come with it. So again, I hope that's been real helpful, and looking forward to hearing what you guys do with Reverb. That's actually not Reverb. Matt Donner signing off. Take care, everyone.
When I first came to Puremind, I had searched the forums and I had searched online, I had read magazines, I had talked with people, but it wasn't enough. What I needed to do was I needed to watch someone mix, start from scratch, and make their way up to a professional project.
I take them through all the steps and break it down, piece by piece. I want them to understand how sound interacts in the environment, number one. Number two, I want them to understand how instruments behave in a room, how to capture those instruments. Here's a microphone. What does a microphone go to? Here it is in a real-world environment. Now let's go back to the classroom and dissect that.
After a certain amount of time within the core program, you have access to the studios, right? And you have access to the microphones, and you have access to just bring in whoever you want and record. The first two Tumbleweed Wanderers EPs, they were both completely tracked here.
I brought my band in, we set up drums, did overdubs, had other Puremind students on board as engineers, and we had a really, really good time tracking those songs.
There's a lot of hands-on experience. You get to see bands get recorded, you get to be involved with setting up the mics, the miking techniques, the compressors, how everything in a studio flows. It's good to have that knowledge and the hands-on experience with the professionals that have done that kind of work.
There's no shortage to what you can do. It's a supportive environment that says, here is a space where you can be creative and mess up. And not only will we not judge you for messing up, we'll applaud you in those efforts.